I still remember the exact moment my entire family dynamic shattered into a million pieces. My father's face was scarlet with rage as he screamed those words at me across the dining room table. "Leave and don't come back." The china plates from our Sunday dinner rattled with the force of his voice. My mother sat in stunned silence, eyes fixed on her half-eaten roast chicken. For years, I'd been the financial backbone of my struggling parents, working overtime to support them while building my own life. But in that moment of raw fury when my father demanded I leave their home forever, I didn't beg or cry as they expected. Instead, I calmly said something that left them completely speechless, their faces frozen in disbelief. Growing up in Lakeside, Ohio, our family was what most would call typical middle-class America. Dad worked at the local manufacturing plant for over 25 years, while Mom balanced part-time retail with being home when my brother Jack and I returned from school. We weren't wealthy by any stretch, but my parents, Thomas and Diane Miller, made sure we never felt deprived. "Family sticks together, no matter what" was practically our household motto, repeated during every holiday gathering and difficult moment. When I graduated with my marketing degree from Ohio State, I was thrilled to land a position at North Star Creative in Chicago. The starting salary seemed enormous to someone fresh out of college, and although moving 3 hours away from my hometown brought mixed emotions, I was excited to begin building my career. "We'll miss you terribly, Betsy, but we're so proud," Mom had said, helping me pack my small apartment's worth of belongings. Dad had squeezed my shoulder in that way. He had not big on words, but the gesture conveying everything: pride, love, the bittersweet feeling of watching your child step into independence. For the first few years, everything worked perfectly. I'd drive back to Lakeside one weekend each month, bringing small gifts and stories about city life. My parents seemed genuinely happy for me as I advanced from junior copywriter to account manager, each promotion bringing new responsibilities and better compensation. The shift happened so gradually, I barely noticed it beginning. 3 years into my Chicago life, Dad came home one Thursday afternoon with a stunned expression and a cardboard box containing the contents of his desk. After 25 years at the same company, he'd been laid off as part of a massive corporate downsizing. "They didn't even give us warning," he told me during our weekly phone call, voice hollow with disbelief. "Just called us in one by one. 20 minutes to clean out my desk with security watching like I might steal something." At 57, my father discovered the job market had little interest in manufacturing supervisors without a college degree. Mom picked up extra shifts at the department store, but their combined income plummeted. Their mortgage, car payments, and the lingering medical bills from Dad's knee surgery the previous year quickly became overwhelming. I started helping without being asked. First, it was covering their cell phone bill, just temporarily, I thought, then paying off their car to eliminate that monthly burden. Soon, I was sending regular money for groceries and utilities. "It's just until Dad finds something," Mom would assure me, though her voice carried notes of worry we both recognized but didn't acknowledge. 6 months stretched into a year, with Dad taking only sporadic part-time work that paid a fraction of his previous salary. By then, I'd been promoted again and could absorb these expenses, though not without sacrifice. I delayed moving to a better apartment, put off vacation plans, and worked overtime to ensure my parents wouldn't lose their home. "You're an angel," Mom told me during one visit, her eyes welling with tears, as I handed her an envelope containing enough cash to cover their property tax bill. "I don't know what we would do without you." The gratitude seemed genuine and made the financial strain worthwhile. These were the people who had sacrificed for me my entire childhood. Wasn't it right that I helped them through this rough patch? When the expenses became too complicated to manage through cash and bank transfers, I added them as authorized users to one of my credit cards. For emergencies only, I'd explained, showing them how to use it. Groceries, medications, anything essential you need before the next time I can send money. They'd nodded solemnly, Dad, promising they wouldn't abuse my generosity. For several months, the system worked well. The charges were reasonable: the local grocery store, the pharmacy, the occasional tank of gas, until they weren't. The first unusual charge caught my eye during my monthly budget review: $170 at the Lakeside Grill, an upscale restaurant I knew my parents considered too expensive, even in their financially stable days. I almost called immediately, but decided to wait and see if there were more surprises. There were. In the following weeks, charges appeared from Nordstrom, a weekend stay at a bed and breakfast in a nearby tourist town, and a series of purchases at home decor stores. None of these were emergencies by any definition of the word. During my next visit home, I noticed new throw pillows on the couch, a decorative mirror in the hallway, and Mom wearing a sweater I recognized from Nordstrom's premium collection. They made no mention of these purchases, instead lamenting their ongoing financial struggles over dinner. We've had to cut back so much. Mom sighed, serving a dessert I hadn't seen her make before, one that required specialty ingredients I spotted on the counter. Your father's been so stressed about the mortgage payment this month. I waited until after dinner when we were washing dishes together to broach the subject gently. Mom, I noticed some charges on the card that seemed, well, not exactly emergencies. The change in her demeanor was immediate. Her shoulders stiffened, and when she turned to face me, her expression had hardened defensively. Are you monitoring every penny we spend now? Checking up on us like children? No, of course not, I backpedaled, surprised by her reaction. I just want to make sure we're on the same page about what the card is for. Dad entered the kitchen, then having overheard our conversation, his face flushed with an anger I rarely saw directed at me. So now we need your permission to have a decent meal once in a while. After working our fingers to the bone for 40 years, his voice rose with each word. We raised you, put you through college, and now you think that gives you the right to police how we live. That's not what We deserve small comforts after working hard our whole lives. Mom interrupted, tears forming in her eyes. Do you know how humiliating it is to depend on your child at our age? To have to ask for help buying groceries? The guilt hit me like a physical blow. Was I being petty controlling? They weren't spending thousands after all, and maybe these small indulgences helped them cope with their drastically changed circumstances. I apologized, assuring them I trusted their judgment completely. But as I drove back to Chicago that Sunday evening, an unsettled feeling lingered. The charges continued growing in both frequency and amount, while my parents' gratitude seemed to diminish proportionally. Each month, I paid the credit card bill in full, watching my own savings dwindle, while wondering if I was helping or enabling a problem I didn't fully understand yet. Jack's unexpected visit to our parents' home coincided with my regular monthly trip, about 6 months after Dad lost his job. My younger brother had moved to Denver 3 years earlier with his wife Amanda, where they were building their lives around his engineering career and their newborn daughter. We didn't see each other often, so I was genuinely excited when he called to say they'd be in town. Amanda's sister is getting married near Cleveland, so we figured we'd extend the trip and visit Mom and Dad too, he explained. The initial reunion was warm hugs, all around exclamations over how big baby Ella had grown, Mom proudly serving elaborate dinner that seemed out of proportion to what their budget should allow. I noticed Jack's eyes narrowing slightly as he took in the new 60-inch television in the living room, the expensive coffee maker on the counter items I knew hadn't been there during his last visit. After dinner, while Mom and Amanda were occupied with the baby, Jack suggested we take a walk around the neighborhood like we used to as teenagers. The April evening was cool but pleasant, cherry trees beginning to bloom along our old paper route. So he began once we were a block from the house. When did Mom and Dad win the lottery? I sighed, kicking at a pebble on the sidewalk. They didn't. Could have fooled me. That's a $3,000 TV they just bought Betsy, plus all the other new stuff. Last I heard, Dad was still mostly unemployed, and Mom was working retail. What am I missing? The whole story spilled out as we walked Dad's ongoing unemployment, my financial support, the credit card, and the increasingly concerning spending patterns. Jack stopped walking abruptly, turning to face me with an expression mixing disbelief and frustration. You're kidding me, right? You're bankrolling their lifestyle. Do you know they asked me for money too? This was news to me. They did. When? About 4 months ago. Said they were behind on bills and might lose the house. I told them I couldn't. We're saving for a down payment, plus daycare costs are killing us. He ran a hand through his hair, a nervous habit from childhood. I felt terrible saying no, but Amanda and I truly couldn't swing it. Now I find out they're buying luxury items while crying poverty. What the hell, Betsy? A chill ran through me that had nothing to do with the evening air. They told you they might lose the house. They haven't missed a mortgage payment, I've made sure of it. Well, that's what they said. Jack resumed, walking his pace quicker now. You know what this is, right? You're enabling them. They've found a golden goose and have no incentive to change their situation. His words stung because they articulated the concerns I'd been suppressing. They raised us, Jack. They sacrificed for us. Don't they deserve help when they need it? Help, yes. A blank check for whatever they want. No. Jack's voice softened. Look, I love them too. But there's a difference between supporting someone through hard times and becoming their personal ATM. This isn't sustainable for you, and it's not healthy for them. The conversation created a rift between us. Jack believed I was enabling destructive behavior. I felt he was being callous about our parents' situation. We returned to the house in strained silence, and the rest of his visit maintained a superficial pleasantness that didn't quite mask the tension. After Jack left, I found myself increasingly torn between family loyalty and my growing financial anxiety. The overtime hours I worked to cover my parents' expenses were taking a toll. Dark circles became permanent fixtures under my eyes, and I'd declined so many social invitations that my Chicago friends had nearly stopped asking. Dating had become non-existent who had the time or energy. My best friend Taylor noticed the change during our rare lunch together. When was the last time you did something just for you? She asked, studying my face with concern. You look exhausted, Betsy. I'm fine, I insisted, the response automatic. Just busy with work. This is more than busy. You're working 60-hour weeks, you've canceled our last 3 plans, and you're losing weight. She reached across the table to squeeze my hand. What's really going on? The simple kindness broke something in me. Before I knew it, I was telling Taylor everything, the financial drain, the growing resentment, the guilt I felt for resenting the sacrifice. Have you established any boundaries at all? She asked when I finished. Any guidelines about what you will and won't cover? I shook my head. Every time I try, it turns into this huge emotional thing. They make me feel like I'm attacking them just by bringing it up. That's manipulation, whether they realize it or not, Taylor said gently. You need to take care of yourself too. You can't pour from an empty cup. I knew she was right, but changing the dynamic seemed impossible without fracturing my relationship with my parents. Then, just as I was gathering courage to have a difficult conversation about financial boundaries, something happened that forced my hand in the worst possible way. The letter arrived at my apartment on a Tuesday morning, a notice from a mortgage company I didn't recognize, thanking me for my recent refinance application on a property at my parents' address. I stared at it in confusion. I hadn't applied to refinance anything. I didn't even own property in Lakeside. 3 hours and multiple increasingly distressing phone calls later, I had the horrifying truth. My parents had applied to refinance their mortgage using my name, address, and somehow my social security number. They had actually been approved based on my excellent credit score, with paperwork supposedly signed by me, but clearly forged. The mortgage company representative sounded sympathetic but firm. This appears to be a case of identity theft, Miss Miller. You'll need to file a police report to dispute these charges. Identity theft. By my own parents. The violation left me physically nauseated. I canceled my afternoon meetings and drove straight to Lakeside, my hands shaking on the steering wheel the entire 3 hours. They were both home when I arrived, unannounced, Mom, startled to see me in the middle of a weekday. Betsy, what a lovely surprise. Is everything okay? Her smile faltered as she registered my expression. I held up the mortgage letter without preamble. What is this? The color drained from her face. She called for my father, who emerged from the garage, wiping his hands on a rag. What's going on? He asked, then stopped short when he saw me. Guilt flashed across his features before he composed himself. You're supposed to be at work. And you're supposed to be looking for a job, not committing fraud using my identity. I countered, my voice shaking with anger. How could you do this? Do you have any idea how serious this is? Don't be so dramatic, my father scoffed, though his eyes wouldn't meet mine. We just needed to refinance to lower our payments. The bank wouldn't approve us on our own. So you decided. Identity theft was the solution. This is a felony. It could destroy my credit, not to mention our relationship. We raised you, my father suddenly shouted, the facade cracking. We gave you everything you owe us. The words hit me like a physical blow. I owe you. I've been supporting you financially for almost 2 years. I've sacrificed my savings, my social life, even my health to help you. And this is how you repay me. We needed to do something, my mother interjected, tears streaming down her face. The bank was going to foreclose. That's another lie, I said, the realization crystallizing. I've been paying your mortgage. There was no risk of foreclosure unless you've been hiding other financial problems from me. Their silence confirmed my suspicion. "What else haven't you told me?" I demanded. Neither answered directly. Instead, my father's expression hardened, his voice dropping to a dangerous calm. "You don't understand adult responsibilities yet. Sometimes difficult decisions need to be made for the good of the family. This wasn't for the family. This was for you, and it's illegal." I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. "I'm not pressing charges this time, but we need to talk about what happens next." The rest of that afternoon passed in a haze of tension and unspoken accusations. We sat through an excruciating dinner, my mother attempting to maintain normalcy by chattering about neighborhood gossip while my father and I barely spoke. The mortgage refinance hung in the air like a toxic cloud, unaddressed but contaminating everything. I slept fitfully in my old bedroom that night, listening to my parents' muffled arguments through the wall and wondering how we had reached this breaking point and where we could possibly go from here. The morning after discovering the mortgage fraud, I returned to Chicago with my mind spinning. The betrayal felt like a physical weight on my chest. I called in sick to work for the first time in years and spent the day in a daze, alternating between tears and stunned disbelief. By the end of that week, I knew I needed professional help navigating this situation. Taylor recommended her financial advisor, Marion Watts, who specialized in family financial entanglements. Marion's office was warm and inviting, but her assessment of my situation was clinically direct. "What you're describing is financial abuse," she said after listening to my story. "It's unfortunately common in parent-child relationships, especially when roles reverse due to economic hardship." I flinched at the term abuse. "That seems harsh. They're struggling and I can afford to help." "Helping is one thing," Marion replied, sliding her glasses up her nose. "But they've crossed several boundaries. Using your identity for the mortgage refinance is illegal. The emotional manipulation when you question expenditures is concerning. And most importantly, this arrangement is clearly unsustainable for you." She showed me the hard numbers. At my current rate of supporting them, I would deplete my emergency fund within 6 months and be unable to contribute to my retirement account. The trajectory was alarming. "They're my parents," I said weakly. "I can't just cut them off." "No one's suggesting that," Marion assured me. "But boundaries are essential both for your financial health and for their long-term stability. Right now, you're enabling dependency rather than fostering independence." Over the next 2 weeks, Marion helped me develop a comprehensive plan. We created a budget that included gradually reduced financial support for my parents over 12 months, designed to give them time to adjust. I researched state and federal assistance programs they qualified for, compiled information on job retraining options for my father, and even found a financial counseling service that offered sliding scale fees. I rehearsed how to present this information compassionately but firmly. Marion even role-played potential reactions with me, helping me prepare for the emotional manipulation tactics she warned might come. "Remember," she said during our final session, "this isn't about abandoning them. It's about helping them help themselves while preserving your own future." Armed with a folder of resources printouts and a clear plan, I drove to Lakeside the following Sunday. Mom had invited me for dinner as usual, seemingly hoping we could pretend the mortgage incident never happened. I'd accepted, knowing this conversation needed to happen in person. I arrived early to help with dinner preparation, trying to establish a positive atmosphere before the difficult discussion. Mom seemed grateful for the assistance, and we worked side by side preparing roast chicken, her specialty. "It's so good to have you home, sweetie," she said, squeezing my arm affectionately. "Your father's been in a mood all week, but seeing you always cheers him up." The casual reference to the tension without acknowledging its cause was typical of our family's conflict avoidance. I smiled tightly but said nothing, saving my energy for the conversation to come. Dinner began pleasantly enough. Dad seemed to have decided to be on his best behavior, asking about my work, and even managing to sound interested in my responses. We made it all the way to dessert, Mom's apple pie, before I finally gathered my courage. "I wanted to talk to you both about something important." I began, my heart racing despite weeks of preparation. My parents exchanged glances. "That sounds serious," Mom said with forced lightness. "Everything okay at work?" "Work is fine. This is about our financial arrangement." I pulled the folder from my bag and set it on the table. "I've put together a plan that I think will help all of us." I explained as gently as possible the gradual reduction in support, the assistance programs, the financial counseling options. I emphasized that I would continue helping during the transition, that I wasn't abandoning them but trying to find a sustainable solution. I even acknowledged the difficulty of their situation, expressing genuine empathy for the challenges they faced. Initially, they seemed to listen. Mom nodded occasionally, and Dad's expression, while guarded, wasn't openly hostile. For a brief, hopeful moment, I thought they might actually be receptive. "See, there are several programs you qualify for," I said, pointing to a highlighted section of my research. "And this job retraining initiative specifically targets workers displaced from manufacturing." The counselor I spoke with said. Counselor Dad interrupted, his tone suddenly sharp. "You've been discussing our private business with strangers." "Financial counselors," I clarified. "Professional advisors who—" "I know what counselors are," he snapped. "What I want to know is why my daughter thinks it's appropriate to air our financial laundry to outsiders." I wasn't airing anything. I was seeking expert advice on how to help us all move forward. By cutting us off, Mom interjected, her voice trembling. "After everything we've done for you." "That's not what I'm suggesting at all," I countered, struggling to keep my voice even. "I'm proposing a transition plan with plenty of support. I'm just trying to help you become self-sufficient again." Self-sufficient, Dad's voice rose as his face reddened. "I worked for 25 years providing for this family. Don't lecture me about self-sufficiency when you've barely been in the workforce a minute. You think because you've got a fancy job in Chicago you know better than we do?" The conversation was veering off course. I took a deep breath, trying to redirect. "This isn't about knowing better. It's about finding a solution that works for everyone. The current situation isn't sustainable." "Sustainable," Dad repeated mockingly. "Listen to you with your corporate buzzwords. What happened to family takes care of family. Or does that only apply when it's convenient for you?" "I have been taking care of family," I said, my own frustration mounting. "I've been paying your mortgage, your utilities, your groceries, and apparently your shopping sprees for almost 2 years while you refuse to look for steady work or accept any programs that might actually help." Dad slammed his hand on the table, making the dishes jump. "I've been looking, there's nothing out there for someone my age." "There are options," I insisted, tapping the folder. "Right here." "You've changed," Mom interrupted, tears welling in her eyes. "The city has changed you. You used to care about family above everything. Now all you care about is your money and your fancy life." The accusation stung, but I recognized the deflection tactic. This isn't about me changing. It's about establishing healthy boundaries. Boundaries. Dad's voice had risen to nearly a shout now. "Is that what they call abandoning your family these days?" "I'm not abandoning anyone. I'm trying to help in a way that doesn't bankrupt me or enable dependency." "Enable." Dad stood abruptly, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. "We're your parents, not some charity case for you to enable or establish boundaries with. We sacrificed everything for you. Vacations, we never took the car I drove until it died. The second job your mother worked. So you could have dance lessons." I remained seated, trying to stay calm, and I'm grateful for all of that. "But that doesn't mean—" "It means you owe us," he roared, all pretense of civility gone. "It means when your parents need help, you help them without conditions or judgments or fancy budget plans that treat us like children." "The mortgage wasn't help," I said quietly. "It was fraud. Using my identity without my knowledge crossed a line that can't be uncrossed. That was the match to gasoline." Dad's face contorted with fury. "Get out," he hissed. "Dad, please." "Leave and don't come back," he shouted, gesturing wildly toward the door. "If we're such a burden to you, if helping your own parents is such a hardship, then go. Go back to your precious Chicago life, and your money and your boundaries." Mom was openly crying now, but made no move to intervene. The moment stretched between us, a crossroads I hadn't anticipated, despite all my preparation. In previous arguments, I'd always backed down, always prioritized keeping peace over standing my ground. The expectation in my father's eyes was clear. He was certain I would capitulate as I always had. But something had shifted in me. Months of financial strain, the shocking betrayal of the mortgage fraud, the gradual recognition of the manipulation patterns, it had all culminated in this moment of clarity. I slowly rose from my chair, maintaining eye contact with my father. "You're right," I said with unexpected calm. "I will leave, and I'm taking my financial support with me. The credit card will be canceled tomorrow morning." The statement landed like a bomb in the quiet dining room. My father's mouth opened and closed soundlessly. My mother's sob caught in her throat. Neither had expected me to actually agree to leave, much less to follow through on withdrawing support. The shock on their faces told me they had been certain the threat would bring me back in line. I gathered my folder and my purse, took one last look at their stunned expressions, and walked out the door without another word. The 3-hour drive back to Chicago was a blur of tears and second-guessing. Rain pounded against the windshield, matching my emotional state as I navigated the dark highway. Had I done the right thing? Was I being selfish? The guilt was overwhelming, threatening to send me back to Lakeside with apologies and promises to continue the financial support indefinitely. I pulled into a rest stop halfway home, too distraught to drive safely. With shaking hands, I called Taylor. "They kicked me out," I said when she answered, my voice cracking. "Or technically, I left when Dad told me to leave and never come back." "Oh, Betsy. Are you okay? Where are you?" "Somewhere in Indiana. Pulled over at a rest stop." I wiped futilely at my tears. I told them I'm cutting off financial support. I actually said it, Taylor, and then I left. "I'm proud of you," she said firmly. "That took incredible courage." "It doesn't feel like courage. It feels terrible. Like I'm abandoning them." "You're not abandoning them. You're refusing to enable behavior that was hurting all of you." Her voice was gentle but resolute. "This is the right thing, even though it's the hard thing." What if they're right? What if I am just being selfish? Setting boundaries isn't selfish. And remember, they committed actual fraud using your identity. That crossed a fundamental line. We talked until my breathing steadied, and I felt capable of continuing the drive. Taylor's unwavering support helped anchor me as I navigated both the rainy highway and my turbulent emotions. The next morning, I followed through on every aspect of my statement. I called the credit card company and canceled the card, removing my parents as authorized users. I contacted my bank to ensure no additional accounts could be opened in my name. I emailed a lawyer specializing in identity theft, making an appointment for later that week. The finality of these actions brought another wave of guilt, but also a surprising sense of relief. For the first time in nearly 2 years, I wasn't responsible for supporting 3 adults. The weight that lifted from my shoulders was one I hadn't fully acknowledged until it was gone. That temporary relief was short-lived. By midday, my phone was buzzing constantly with texts and calls from both parents. I let most go to voicemail, not yet ready for another confrontation, but the messages painted a clear picture of their reaction. From my father, "I can't believe you'd do this to your own family. After everything we've done for you, you've changed, and not for the better." From my mother, tearful voicemails, "Please call us back, sweetie. Your father didn't mean what he said. We're just going through a rough patch. We need you." The emotional whiplash was dizzying accusations of betrayal, followed by pleas for reconciliation, angry demands, followed by guilt-inducing reminders of past sacrifices. The manipulation tactics Marion had warned me about were playing out exactly as predicted. I finally texted back a brief, neutral response, "I need some space right now. We can talk when things are calmer." Then I muted their notifications, allowing myself room to breathe and process. The lawyer I met with, Sarah Dominguez, was direct and compassionate. After reviewing my situation, she helped me file the necessary paperwork to dispute the fraudulent mortgage application and protect my credit score. When she asked if I wanted to pursue charges against my parents, I declined immediately. "They're still my parents," I explained, feeling torn. "I don't want to see them prosecuted. I just want this fixed." "I understand," she said, though her expression suggested she'd seen similar situations end poorly. "Just be aware that without formal charges, there may be limits to what we can accomplish. And if there's a pattern of identity theft, it rarely stops with one incident." Her warning lingered with me as I threw myself into work, grateful for the distraction of looming deadlines and client demands. I started therapy, finally acknowledging the toll the situation had taken on my mental health. I made a point of reconnecting with friends I'd neglected, accepting Taylor's invitation to join her hiking group to get out of my apartment and clear my head. It was on one of these hikes, a challenging trail through a state park north of Chicago, that I met Michael. He was Taylor's coworker, new to Chicago, and eager to explore the surrounding natural areas. Something about his easy laugh and thoughtful questions drew me in, though I was hesitant to share details about my family situation so soon. Complicated family stuff I deflected when the topic of weekend plans came up over post-hike coffee. Not really in touch with them right now. I get that, he replied, not pressing further. Families are complex ecosystems. Sometimes distance is the healthiest option. His understanding without judgment was refreshing, a welcome contrast to the emotional minefield I'd been navigating. We exchanged numbers, and for the first time in months, I found myself looking forward to something unrelated to work or family drama. 2 weeks after the confrontation, Jack called. We hadn't spoken since his visit, our relationship strained by differing perspectives on our parents' situation. So he said without preamble, I just got a very interesting call from Mom. Let me guess. I'm the ungrateful daughter who abandoned them in their time of need. Something like that. He paused. She didn't mention the mortgage fraud part, interestingly enough. I'm not surprised. I sighed, sinking onto my couch. Are you calling to tell me I'm wrong too? Actually, no. I'm calling to say I think you did the right thing. The support in his voice brought unexpected tears to my eyes. It should have happened sooner, honestly. This pattern was unhealthy for everyone. They're making me feel like the worst person alive, Jack. I know. They've been calling me constantly, too, trying to get me to talk sense into you. But here's the thing. I'm hearing a very different version of events from them than what I suspect actually happened. Jack remained in contact with our parents, becoming an uncomfortable middleman in our estrangement. Our weekly calls became a lifeline, helping me maintain perspective when self-doubt crept in. Though he was careful not to betray confidences, he confirmed my suspicion that my parents were presenting themselves as innocent victims of an ungrateful child. The most painful confirmation of this came 3 weeks after our confrontation. I received an unexpected email from Mrs. Henderson, my high school English teacher, who had mentored me through college applications and remained a trusted advisor. Betsy, I hope this finds you well, she wrote. I ran into your mother at the grocery store yesterday. She was quite distraught and mentioned you've cut contact with your parents without explanation during a difficult time for them. I know there are always two sides to every story, and I'm certainly not judging, but I wanted to reach out and see if you're doing okay. This doesn't sound like the thoughtful young woman I've known for years. The realization that my parents were actively damaging my reputation in the community I grew up in hit like a physical blow. For a moment, I was tempted to respond with a detailed account of the real situation, the financial exploitation, the identity theft, the emotional manipulation, but something held me back. Engaging in a public battle of competing narratives would only escalate the situation and potentially hurt all involved. Instead, I replied with a measured response. Thank you for your concern. You're right that there are two sides to every situation. I'm working through some complicated family matters privately. I appreciate your reaching out and have always valued your mentorship. Though the high road felt lonely, it also brought clarity. This wasn't about winning public opinion or proving who was right. It was about establishing healthy boundaries and rebuilding my life on more solid ground. As painful as the estrangement was, it was allowing me to recognize unhealthy patterns I'd been blind to while enmeshed in them. While my professional life had always been my strength, other areas began to flourish in the absence of constant financial and emotional drain. I joined a book club I'd been putting off for months. I finally visited the art museum that had been on my Chicago bucket list since moving. My tentative connection with Michael developed into regular hiking dates and dinners, where conversation flowed easily. You seem different, Taylor observed over lunch one day, about a month after the confrontation. More present, less exhausted all the time. I considered this. I still feel guilty sometimes, but also lighter, like I can breathe again. That's what happens when you stop carrying the weight of other people's problems on your shoulders, she said. It doesn't mean you don't love them. It just means you love yourself enough too. Her words resonated deeply. The guilt hadn't disappeared entirely, but it was gradually being balanced by a growing sense of self-respect. For perhaps the first time in my adult life, I was putting my own oxygen mask on first and discovering I wasn't the selfish person my parents' accusations had made me fear I was. Exactly 3 weeks and 2 days after walking out of my parents' house, my phone lit up with my mother's name. It was a Wednesday evening and I was just finishing a late workday at my apartment. I stared at the screen, heart pounding, uncertain whether to answer. In the end, curiosity won out. Hello, I answered cautiously. Betsy, honey. My mother's voice was surprisingly cheerful, as if our last interaction had been a pleasant Sunday dinner rather than a family-fracturing confrontation. How are you doing? We haven't talked in so long. The casual tone was jarring. I'm fine. Is everything okay? Oh, sure, everything's fine here. Your father's out in the garage working on his old motorcycle again. She chuckled fondly. You know how he gets with his projects. I waited, confused by this approach. Was she pretending nothing had happened? Or was this an olive branch, an attempt to normalize relations? Listen, sweetie, she continued after a moment, her voice dropping to a slightly more serious tone. I'm calling because there seems to be some mix-up with the credit card. It's not working anymore. And there it was. Not concern for me, not an apology, not even an acknowledgement of our conflict, just the real reason for the call. It's not a mix-up, Mom, I said evenly. I canceled it just like I said I would. There was a pause then, but we needed that for groceries this week. I told you I was canceling it. That wasn't unclear. Well, yes, but... She sounded genuinely bewildered. We didn't think you actually meant it. You've always been such a good daughter. The implication that setting boundaries made me a bad daughter stung, but I held firm. I meant everything I said. The financial support has ended. But how are we supposed to manage? There was an edge of panic in her voice now. Your father still hasn't found steady work, and my hours got cut back last week. I gave you information about assistance programs. Did you look into any of them? Before she could answer, I heard my father's voice in the background, then rustling as he apparently took the phone. Betsy. His voice was tight with controlled anger. What's this about canceling the card? I canceled it 3 weeks ago, Dad. Right after you told me to leave and never come back. That was said in the heat of the moment he dismissed. Families argue. You know I didn't mean it literally. But I meant what I said literally. The financial support has ended. He was silent for a moment, clearly recalibrating his approach. When he spoke again, his voice had shifted to urgency. We have an emergency situation here. The water heater is leaking badly. We need to replace it immediately, and we don't have the funds right now. This is serious, Betsy. We could have water damage throughout the house. The sudden emergence of an emergency requiring immediate financial assistance was exactly what Marion had warned might happen. There are emergency home repair assistance programs through the county, I said. I included that information in the folder I left. Government handouts. He practically spat the words. We're not charity cases. It's not charity, Dad. It's practical assistance designed exactly for situations like yours. So you'll let your parents' house flood rather than help your own family. Is that who you've become? I closed my eyes, steeling myself against the guilt trip. I've been helping for nearly 2 years. I've given you thousands of dollars. I've paid your mortgage, utilities, and daily expenses while sacrificing my own financial security. And in return, you committed fraud using my identity and made me feel guilty for questioning luxury purchases on a card meant for emergencies. That's not fair. What's not fair is emotional manipulation and financial exploitation, I interrupted, surprising myself with my firmness. I'm not reactivating the card. I'm not sending more money. If you have a genuine emergency, there are resources available to help you. I gave you all that information. This is how you repay everything we've done for you. His voice had risen to nearly a shout. We'll remember this, Betsy. When you need us someday, we'll remember who turned their back on family. The threat hung in the air for a moment before I responded quietly. I hope you get the water heater fixed, Dad. Goodbye. I ended the call and sat in stunned silence. Emotions, swirling, guilt, sadness, anger, and underneath it all, a small but growing sense of pride in maintaining my boundary despite intense pressure. Jack called the following evening with new information that cast the emergency in a different light. So there was no water heater emergency, he said, without preamble, when I picked up. I called a plumber friend to check on Mom and Dad, pretending I was just concerned about them. The water heater is fine. Not leaking, not damaged, not even particularly old. Though I had suspected as much, the confirmation was still jarring. They completely made it up to try to get money from me. Yep, Jack sighed heavily. But that's not the worst part. When I was there, I overheard Dad on the phone with Uncle Steve asking for a loan. Said they were in dire straits because their ungrateful daughter had abandoned them. Great, I muttered. So they're working their way through the family, spreading lies and asking for handouts. And getting them in some cases. Aunt Caroline called me afterward. Apparently they've hit up nearly every relative they have over the past 6 months while you were still supporting them. I sat down heavily on my couch. What? Why would they need more money? I was covering all their essential expenses. That's what I wondered. So I did some digging. Jack's voice lowered conspiratorially. Remember that insurance settlement Dad got after his work accident 8 years ago? Vaguely. It wasn't huge, right? Like $20,000. Try $80,000. And they spent every penny of it within 2 years on home renovations. A boat they barely used and sold at a loss, and that disastrous investment in Uncle Rick's restaurant venture. The revelation left me speechless. $80,000 could have provided a substantial financial cushion for their current situation. Instead, they'd blown through it and hidden that fact while asking for my support. There's more, Jack continued when I didn't respond. I checked county property records. They took out a second mortgage 3 years ago before Dad lost his job. They owe way more on the house than we realized. Each new piece of information felt like another betrayal. Why didn't they tell us any of this? Why hide it? My guess, pride, poor financial management, and not wanting to admit they'd made bad decisions, Jack said. It's easier to position themselves as victims of circumstance than acknowledge their role in creating this situation. The conversation with Jack fundamentally changed my perspective on the entire situation. What I had believed was a temporary crisis caused by my father's job loss was actually the culmination of years of financial mismanagement hidden from their children while they sought bailouts, rather than addressing the underlying issues. The following weekend, my phone rang with an unfamiliar number. The voice that greeted me was one I hadn't heard in years. Betsy, it's your Aunt Caroline. Jack gave me your number. Do you have a minute to talk? My father's older sister had moved to Arizona years ago, and contact had been sporadic at best. We caught up briefly before she got to the purpose of her call. Jack mentioned you've been having some difficulties with your parents about financial support, she said delicately. That's putting it mildly, I replied, then gave her a condensed version of events, including the identity theft. She was quiet for a moment after I finished. I wish I could say I was surprised, but this isn't the first time they've done something like this. What do you mean? Caroline sighed heavily. Your father has a pattern of financial, let's call it creativity. Did you know your grandparents remortgaged their house to bail him out of a failed business venture in his 30s? Or that he borrowed money from every family member who would give it when you were in high school, most of which was never repaid? I hadn't known either of these things. As Caroline continued sharing family history I'd never been privy to, a clearer picture emerged. My parents, particularly my father, had a long-established pattern of financial irresponsibility, followed by seeking bailouts from family members. The current situation with me wasn't an anomaly. It was part of a multi-generational pattern. I don't tell you this to hurt you, Caroline said gently. But sometimes when we're in the middle of family dynamics, it's hard to see the forest for the trees. Your parents love you in their way, but they have unhealthy patterns that won't change unless they face consequences. They've made me feel like a terrible daughter for setting boundaries, I admitted. That's because boundaries threaten access to what they want from you. It doesn't make you terrible, it makes you wise. Her voice softened. I wish I'd had your courage when I was your age. It took me decades to establish healthy boundaries with my brother. By the time we hung up, I felt both validated and deeply saddened. The wider family perspective helped me see that this wasn't a simple case of helping parents through hard times. It was enabling destructive patterns that had been reinforced over decades. This realization was painful but clarifying. My conflict with my parents wasn't really about money at all, it was about honesty, respect, and responsibility. The financial exploitation was a symptom of a deeper dysfunction that money alone could never fix. As long as I continued providing financial support without addressing the underlying issues, I wasn't actually helping them. I was perpetuating a cycle that ultimately hurt everyone involved. After 2 months of separation perspective, gaining and painful revelations, I felt ready for one final conversation with my parents. Not to resume financial support, but to express my truth fully and offer a path forward based on honesty rather than exploitation. I decided against calling ahead. Previous attempts at difficult conversations had allowed them time to prepare defensive tactics. On a crisp Saturday morning in early June, I drove to Lakeside rehearsing what I wanted to say. As I pulled into their driveway, I noticed immediate signs of change. The lawn was overgrown. The flower beds my mother had always meticulously maintained were choked with weeds, and Dad's car had a visibly dented fender that hadn't been repaired. I took a deep breath and knocked on the door of my childhood home, feeling strangely like a visitor rather than family. My mother answered her surprise at seeing me quickly masked by a practiced smile that didn't reach her eyes. Betsy, what a nice surprise. The house beyond her was noticeably different from my last visit. Dust had accumulated on surfaces, mail was piled on the entry table, and there was a general sense of disorder that had never been present during my childhood. "Can we talk?" I asked simply. "All three of us." She hesitated before nodding and calling for my father. He emerged from the back of the house, his initial expression hardening when he saw me. "Well, look who decided to remember where she came from," he said coldly. I didn't rise to the bait. "I'd like to talk. Is that okay?" They led me to the living room, where we sat in awkward silence for a moment. I noticed new scratches on the coffee table water rings that hadn't been wiped away, small signs of a home not being maintained with the care it once had. "You look well," my mother finally offered. "Work must be going well." "It is," I acknowledged. "But I didn't come to talk about work. I came because there are things that need to be said. If you're here to lecture us again about budgeting and government handouts, you can save your breath," my father snapped. "We're managing just fine without your help." The defensiveness was immediate, but I had expected it. "I'm not here to lecture anyone. I'm here because despite everything that's happened, you're still my parents, and I believe in addressing problems directly." I pulled out a folder different from the resource packet I'd brought before. This one contained printouts of credit card statements showing their excessive spending, documentation of the fraudulent mortgage application, and notes from my conversations with extended family members about the pattern of financial deception. "I know about the insurance settlement," I said quietly. "The $80,000 you received and spent without telling me when you asked for my financial support. I know about the second mortgage, the loans from family members, the long history of financial decisions that led to this point." The color drained from both their faces. My mother looked away, unable to meet my eyes, while my father's expression cycled rapidly between shock, anger, and something that might have been shame before settling back on defensive anger. "You've been investigating us," he demanded, "talking to family behind our backs." They came to me, actually. Once they learned I'd stopped financial support, several relatives reached out to share their experiences. I kept my voice calm, factual. "The picture they painted was very different from what you've presented to me." "People exaggerate," my father dismissed. "Your Aunt Caroline always did have it in for me. This isn't about one person's account. It's about a consistent pattern across decades. I laid out the documents one by one. You didn't lose your financial stability when you lost your job, Dad. You'd been financially unstable for years, hiding it from me while I thought I was helping you through a temporary crisis." "How dare you judge us," my mother interjected, finding her voice. "You have no idea what it's like trying to make ends meet at our age." "You're right, I don't. And I sympathize with how difficult that must be. But this isn't about judging you. It's about honesty." I took a deep breath. "I would have helped you either way. You didn't need to lie or manipulate or commit fraud. You could have just told me the truth." "And what good would that have done my father?" demanded his voice, rising. "You'd have judged us just like you're doing now." "No, I would have offered different help. Not just money, but support, finding financial counseling, developing a sustainable budget, working toward real solutions rather than temporary bailouts." I met his gaze steadily. "I would have helped you address the actual problem instead of putting a band-aid on symptoms." The conversation grew increasingly heated as my father's anger escalated. My mother alternated between tearful defenses and cold accusations about my character and values. I maintained my composure, returning always to the central issues of honesty, respect, and appropriate boundaries. "The money was never the real issue," I explained. "It was the deception, the manipulation, the refusal to acknowledge the real problems." "Easy for you to say with your big city salary," my father scoffed. "You have no idea what real problems are." "I've been supporting 3 adults on that salary," I reminded him. "Working overtime, sacrificing my own financial security, putting my life on hold, all while being lied to about the very situation I was trying to help with." His face reddened further. "We never asked you to put your life on hold. That was your choice. It was a choice based on false information. You told me this was temporary, that Dad was actively seeking work, that the money was for necessities only. None of that was completely true. As the argument intensified, my father became increasingly agitated, pacing the living room and gesturing wildly. In his emotional state, he accidentally knocked over a small decorative table, sending a vase crashing to the floor. The sudden noise momentarily paused our argument. "Look what you made me do," he shouted, as if the accident were somehow my fault. "I didn't make you do anything," I said quietly. "Just like I didn't make you spend the insurance settlement, or take out a second mortgage, or use my identity for fraud, or give money to Ryan when you claimed you couldn't make ends meet." The words left my mouth before I fully processed what I was saying. I'd meant to say or give money to other people, thinking of the various loans they'd mentioned to other family members. But a specific name had slipped out instead, though I hadn't intended to mention my cousin. The sudden silence in the room was deafening. My mother's hand flew to her mouth. My father froze mid-gesture, his face registering pure shock. "What did you just say?" I asked, suddenly confused by their reaction. "Nothing," my father said quickly. "You're confused. I said you gave money to Ryan. My cousin Ryan." I frowned, trying to understand their extreme reaction. "Did you loan him money too?" My mother and father exchanged a look I couldn't interpret. Then my father laughed, a harsh, uncomfortable sound. "Ryan. Why would we give money to your cousin Ryan? You know he's had his problems." Ryan had struggled with addiction since his teens, cycling through recovery and relapse. The family rarely discussed him openly, his name typically mentioned in hushed tones, if at all. "Then why did you react that way when I mentioned him?" My father's eyes shifted away. "You're imagining things." But my mother's face had crumpled, tears flowing freely now. "Thomas, maybe we should just tell her." "Diane, don't," my father warned. "Tell me what," I pressed, sensing something significant. My mother looked at my father pleadingly, but when he remained stonily silent, she turned to me. "We've been helping Ryan get back on his feet. He's been clean for 6 months this time, and he needed support for his recovery program. You've been giving money to Ryan while telling me you couldn't make ends meet. The pieces weren't quite fitting together. How much money?" "That's none of your business," my father snapped. "It is my business when you were taking money from me at the same time." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "You claimed you couldn't afford groceries or utilities, but you had enough to support Ryan's recovery." "Family helps family," my father said defensively. "Ryan needed us. So did I. I was struggling to control my own emotions now. I needed honesty. I needed respect. I needed you to not commit fraud using my identity. And all this time you were redirecting money from me to Ryan without telling me." "We knew you wouldn't approve," my mother said weakly, "after what happened at your college graduation. Ryan had shown up high to my graduation, caused a scene, and ultimately stolen gift money from my apartment during the celebration. It had been the last time I'd seen him." The revelation crystallized everything for me. This wasn't just about financial mismanagement or poor boundaries. My parents had been actively deceiving me, taking my support while redirecting resources to someone else behind my back. The financial support I'd provided, sacrificing my own security and future, hadn't even been used entirely for their needs as claimed. "This ends now," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "All of it. The lies, the manipulation, the taking without accountability." I laid out my position clearly. I would not resume financial support under any circumstances, but I was willing to rebuild a relationship based on honesty and appropriate boundaries. I offered resources again for financial counseling, support groups, and assistance programs. I even offered to help my mother update her resume and practice for job interviews if she wanted to increase her hours or find better-paying work. The door remains open for a relationship, I concluded, but only on new, healthier terms. No more financial support, no more lies, no more manipulation. My father's response was coldly predictable. "If you're not here to help when we need it, then you're no daughter of mine." My mother's reaction was more complex anger and defensiveness mixed with what appeared to be genuine reflection. There was a moment, just a flicker, where I thought I saw recognition in her eyes of how far things had gone astray. As I prepared to leave, I handed them a final folder containing the same resources I'd offered before: financial assistance, information counseling, contacts, job search help, along with a letter I'd written expressing my feelings, fully and honestly. I'd included my personal boundaries moving forward and what kind of relationship I was open to having if they chose to respect those boundaries. "This is where we are," I said, placing the folder on the coffee table. What happens next is up to you. I love you both, but I won't enable destructive patterns anymore for any of us." I walked out of their house with a strange mixture of grief and liberation. The conversation had gone both better and worse than I'd anticipated. The revelation about Ryan had been unexpected, but in many ways it was the final piece that made the entire picture clear. This wasn't about love or family loyalty, it was about control, enabling, and dysfunctional patterns that had been reinforced for decades. As I drove away, I realized I truly had done all I could. The next move wasn't mine to make. Either they would choose a healthier path forward, or they wouldn't, but my own path was finally clear. 6 months passed like seasons changing gradually, then suddenly complete. Autumn gave way to winter, the Chicago wind whipping between skyscrapers as holiday decorations appeared in storefronts. Through it all, I maintained my boundaries with a strength I hadn't known I possessed. My parents and I had minimal contact during those months. Occasionally, my mother would text surface-level messages about the weather or a neighborhood event, nothing substantive. I'd respond politely but briefly, neither encouraging nor discouraging the tentative communication. My father maintained his silence, apparently committed to his declaration of disowning me. The distance, while painful, allowed me to rebuild my life on my own terms. My savings account slowly recovered from the near depletion of the previous years. I accepted a promotion at work that brought both greater responsibility and better compensation. My relationship with Michael deepened into something meaningful and supportive. Most surprisingly, my relationship with Jack transformed completely. Where we'd once been distant siblings with occasional holiday phone calls, we now spoke weekly, sharing insights about our childhood and supporting each other through the complex emotions of family estrangement. His perspective as someone who had witnessed but not directly experienced our parents' financial exploitation was invaluable. "You know what I realized," he said during one of our Sunday calls. "They treated us differently financially because I established boundaries earlier. I said no the first time they asked for money, so they turned to you instead." "Lucky you," I said wryly. "Not lucky, just different circumstances. Amanda and I had a new baby and mortgage payments. We genuinely couldn't help even if we'd wanted to. Your success made you a target, Betsy." His words resonated with what I'd learned in therapy, that my financial support hadn't actually been helping my parents, just enabling patterns that ultimately hurt everyone involved. Real help would have looked very different. In early December, an unexpected letter arrived in my mailbox, hand-addressed, postmarked from Lakeside. I recognized my mother's handwriting immediately. For several minutes, I just held the envelope, hesitant to open it and disturb the equilibrium I'd worked so hard to establish. Finally, sitting on my couch with a cup of tea for moral support, I carefully opened it. "Dear Betsy," it began, the handwriting slightly shakier than I remembered. "I'm sending this letter without your father's knowledge. He still believes cutting you off is the right response to your betrayal, as he calls it. But these months of distance have given me time to think, really think about everything that's happened. I've started seeing a counselor. Just me, not your father. He refuses to consider it. Dr. Mason has helped me recognize patterns I never saw before or maybe didn't want to see. The way we've handled money, the way we've treated you and your brother, the dishonesty that became so normal, I stopped noticing it. I'm not writing to ask for money. I'm not writing to make excuses. I'm writing because Dr. Mason suggested I take accountability for my actions as part of my healing process, and because you deserve to hear this even if you choose not to respond. I'm sorry, Betsy. Truly sorry. For the fraud with the mortgage, for the manipulation, for taking advantage of your generosity, for failing to be the mother you deserved, for allowing your father's financial irresponsibility to damage our relationship with you, for not standing up for you when I should have. I don't expect forgiveness, and I don't expect things to go back to how they were. I just wanted you to know that at least one of your parents is trying to understand what went wrong and take responsibility for her part in it. If you're open to it, I'd like to meet somewhere neutral. A coffee shop, perhaps, just to talk. No expectations, no demands. Just a conversation between two adults who share a history, and maybe hopefully a future of some kind. With love and regret, Mom. I read the letter 3 times, emotions swirling too rapidly to identify. Was this genuine, another manipulation tactic? The therapist reference seemed promising, that was a step my mother would never have considered previously. The acknowledgement of specific wrongdoing rather than vague apologies also suggested authenticity. After careful consideration and discussion with both my therapist and Jack, I decided to respond. We arranged to meet at a coffee shop halfway between our homes' neutral territory, as she had suggested. When I arrived, my mother was already there, looking smaller, somehow older than the 6 months of separation should account for. She stood when she saw me, uncertainty written across her features. "Betsy, you came." The relief in her voice was palpable. I said I would. I sat across from her, noticing the absence of her usual perfectly styled hair and carefully applied makeup. This version of my mother looked more authentic, somehow less concerned with appearances. The conversation began awkwardly, surface pleasantries, careful navigation around sensitive topics. But as the minutes passed, something shifted. For perhaps the first time in our relationship, my mother began speaking with genuine vulnerability. "I've been looking at our family patterns," she explained, hands wrapped around her coffee cup as if drawing strength from its warmth. "Not just Thomas and me, but my parents too. The way money was always secretive, always a source of shame and control. I never questioned it, that was just how families operated in my experience." She described her therapy journey, the painful recognitions of her passive role in enabling my father's financial irresponsibility, the gradual awakening to how unfairly they had treated me. "Your father still doesn't see it," she admitted. "He believes children owe their parents unlimited support. That's how he was raised." "And you?" I asked. "What do you believe now?" She considered this carefully. "I believe we failed you, not the other way around. Parents should support their children's independence, not undermine it for their own benefit." Her eyes met mine directly. "I believe what we did was wrong, Betsy. All of it." The acknowledgement, delivered without qualification or excuse, felt like a key unlocking something within me. Not forgiveness exactly, but the possibility of it. We talked for nearly 3 hours, covering ground we'd never explored before. She shared developments in their situation. She'd increased her hours at the department store and taken a weekend position at a local bookshop. They'd finally applied for some of the assistance programs I'd recommended. They'd sold the boat that had been sitting unused in the garage. Small steps, but meaningful ones. "Your father refuses to discuss any of this," she said toward the end of our conversation. "He sees it as betrayal that I'm talking to you at all, much less acknowledging any wrongdoing on our part. I don't know if that will ever change." "That's his choice," I said, surprising myself with how peaceful I felt about it. I can't control his response, only my own boundaries. As we prepared to leave, I outlined those boundaries clearly. What kind of relationship I was open to: regular communication, occasional visits in neutral locations, and what remained off-limits: financial support, unsupervised access to any personal information. My mother accepted these terms with a nod of understanding. "I don't expect things to heal overnight," she said. "I know trust has to be rebuilt slowly. I'm just grateful for the chance to try." In the months that followed, my mother and I established a new kind of relationship, more honest, more balanced, and defined by mutual respect rather than obligation or guilt. We met monthly for coffee, each time digging deeper into authentic connection. She continued her counseling, sometimes sharing insights that showed genuine growth and self-awareness. My father remained estranged by his choice. Occasionally, my mother would mention his stubborn refusal to acknowledge any wrongdoing, his bitterness about what he still viewed as abandonment. I felt sadness about this, but no longer guilt or responsibility to fix it. Some relationships could be healed, others perhaps couldn't, at least not without fundamental changes the other person wasn't willing to make. The true turning point came in early spring when my mother asked for my help updating her resume. She'd applied for an office manager position at a local dental practice, a significant step up from retail work with better hours and substantially better pay. "I'm so nervous," she admitted as we sat at my dining table reviewing her work experience. "I haven't interviewed for anything like this in 20 years. "You can do this," I encouraged her. "You've got all the skills they need: organization, people management, scheduling. You ran our household like a well-oiled machine." We spent the afternoon practicing interview questions, updating her professional wardrobe on a budget, and building her confidence. When she got the job 2 weeks later, her excitement was genuinely touching. "I did it," she said, when she called with the news, her voice trembling slightly. "I'm going to be financially independent again. Really independent, not just saying it while depending on others secretly." That milestone represented more than just employment. It symbolized a fundamental shift in our family dynamic. For the first time, my mother was taking true responsibility for her financial situation rather than relying on others to rescue her. I was offering appropriate support through skills and encouragement rather than money. We were relating as independent adults rather than as financial custodian and dependent. 1 year after the confrontation that had shattered our family dynamic, I sat on the balcony of my new apartment, a place Michael and I had chosen together with room for both our needs and aspirations. Chicago spread before me, lights twinkling as evening settled over the city. My phone buzzed with a text from my mother sharing a photo of her first official paycheck from the dental office. In that quiet moment, I reflected on the journey that had brought me here. The pain of confrontation, the grief of separation, the difficult work of establishing boundaries, all of it had been necessary for genuine healing to begin. Not the superficial peacekeeping I'd practiced for years, but true healing built on honesty and respect. The greatest lesson wasn't about money at all, though finances had been the battleground. It was about the courage to stand in your truth, even when those you love resist it. About recognizing that enabling harmful patterns isn't helping no matter how well-intentioned. About understanding that sometimes the most loving thing you can do for someone is to stop protecting them from the consequences of their own choices. I'd learned that setting boundaries isn't selfish, it's an act of self-respect that ultimately creates the possibility for healthier relationships. That standing firm in the face of manipulation isn't cruel, it's necessary for authentic connection to develop. That true family bonds are built on mutual respect, not obligation or guilt or financial entanglement. Most importantly, I'd learned that breaking unhealthy generational patterns requires someone willing to endure the discomfort of change, the pain of confrontation, the uncertainty of establishing new ways of relating. It's never easy being that person, but the freedom on the other side makes every difficult step worthwhile. Has someone in your life ever made you feel guilty for setting healthy boundaries? How did you handle it? Please share your experiences in the comments below, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this story if it resonated with you. Thank you for listening, and I wish you courage in your own journey toward healthier relationships.